and Mexico. Atan Thomas, before our guests come on,
Mhm.
I know that you've had on your mind the story of Shedeur Sanders, now starting for the Cleveland Browns, playing well for the Cleveland Browns. And it's hard to imagine a quarterback who's come into this league with more scrutiny. So to see him perform is something to see. But what are your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's interesting because just watching, since the draft and seeing him fall in the draft and hearing so many people in mainstream America really applauding while he was, falling in the draft, like taking a victory lap and talking about his arrogance and his this and that. And I was just like, whoa, like, why do y'all hate this man so much? And it really kept going, and you heard the media talking about him. So I really wanted to throw it back to y'all because I have my theories, of course, but let me throw it back to Chuck first. What is your theory as to why mainstream America in particular seems to hate him so much? You know what I mean? On a whole different level. I mean, for cheering for a kid to slip in the draft, I mean that's a lot. You know what I mean? So what are the reasons, Chuck? You tell me.
I'm gonna give you the reason, and then I'm gonna give you what's happening after the reason. And the central reason is white confidence is an asset and black confidence is disrespect. And that's how many white people perceive. He is confident. He doesn't need anyone's money. He can just go to a team and be himself. And white GMs and white executives, they don't like that. They don't like free thinkers. We learned that with Kaepernick, but they just don't like that at all. But let's go back to Sunday's game. What happened? Okay. The Browns are down 31-17 with 6 minutes and 17 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Shedeur Sanders leads an epic comeback. One touchdown on an amazing rush TD for those who've seen it, and then a sweet pass TD perfectly placed in the end zone with just a little bit of time left. And all he needs now is a 2-point conversion. He throws for 364 yards and 4 total TDs. And what does the Browns coach, Kevin Stefanski, do? They take the ball out of his hands and do a wildcat play on a completely hot quarterback. Mm-hmm. And this is the most Brown stuff ever. And my first, second, and third reaction is get that black man out of Cleveland. Because I am of the feeling, and many other people are of the feeling, that he's been sabotaged almost throughout the start in Cleveland, who drafted him and drafted Dylan Gabriel before him. And Shedeur is clearly better. And that there's something about his blackness and his confidence combined that people cannot judge and evaluate his skills properly because he showed incredible skills. So for people who say, why bring race into it? It's because if a white player had the same skills and personality, because they tell me he has an attitude, he would be treated much better. He'd be drafted much higher, not higher than the 5th round, but higher than the number 22 pick that the Browns once used on Johnny Manziel, who had a whole track record of partying and arrests and confidence and gloating. It didn't seem to sink Johnny Manziel in that draft. But with Shedeur Sanders, a young black man, now it's a problem. So people need to look in the mirror. White sports fans need to look in the mirror. White America needs to look in the mirror.
I don't know. I think it's a little more complicated than that, Chuck.
And his dad. So get the dad segue in.
The dad segue? Well, the dad segue really matters to this story. To say that Deion Sanders does not matter to how Shedeur Sanders has been treated is honestly like telling the story of the Titanic and leaving out the iceberg. Because Deion Sanders represents 2 different aspects to this story. The first is that he is a very high-profile NFL coaching candidate. So the fear that you heard coming out of the NFL from organizations like the Saints that had a first-year coach coming in this year, a very young dude coming in to try to coach this team, the idea of bringing in Shedeur Sanders, and if there were any issues during his time there, the idea coming around the back end would be, well, let's just hire Deion to work with Shedeur. So if you draft Shedeur as a franchise quarterback instead of a fifth round quarterback, it creates a dynamic that, say, other, black quarterbacks bring me with confidence. I hear what you're saying about confidence, and there, of course, being more space for white quarterbacks to have that confidence. But there's definitely, we have to say, more space for Cam Ward to have that confidence than Shedeur Sanders. Because for him to show that confidence immediately poses a threat because of his father to the coaching structure of a team. That's one thing. The second thing,
we agree on that, by the way.
Okay, the second thing is Deion Sanders, not with intention at all, also hurt his son's draft stock for the simple reason that Deion has been in the media for decades and is beloved by the media. Absolutely beloved. People in the media loved. I've never met anybody who knew Deion in that context who didn't like him. That also meant that there were a lot of people in the media. Mel Kiper was outraged when Shedeur wasn't picked 9th. And then he was outraged when Shedeur wasn't picked 22nd. And then he was outraged when it was the 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. And frankly, by the 2nd round, I was sharing his outrage. I mean, I don't want to get that twisted at all. That there was very outrageous for him to last that long. But it also did create this kind of odd disconnect where an NFL establishment that loathes the media was behind him. Now, I know what you're going to say, Etan, and I'm going to throw it to you on this because there's also been a lot of media that's been horrible to Shedeur Sanders. Absolutely horrible. And that needs to be part of this story as well. I just feel like the negative media attention on Shedeur was a pile-on after the draft, not a build-up before the draft, because the build-up before the draft had all of us, myself included, assuming he was going to be a first-round pick.
So my question is a little bit more towards mainstream America's loathing of him. And I hear you from the structural standpoint of the NFL and teams and their worry about, what would happen to the coaching rankings if the team didn't do well and Shedeur was your franchise quarterback. I understand that. But not talking about that, though. Talking about literally mainstream America's hatred towards him. More from what Chuck was talking about. He's confident. It's I don't need a manufactured story. They love we came from the projects. We plucked him out of the ghetto, and he had a single mother, and now he owes it all to this white coach who saved his life. He didn't have any of that narrative. You know what I mean? So he walked into I've
seen that movie plenty of times, though.
It didn't win an Oscar?
Plenty of times.
Didn't it win an Oscar?
So when Chuck said that it's the confidence that is something that mainstream America has always loathed when it comes to black athletes, both men and women. You know what I mean? You talk about Angel Reese, talk about the Fab Five, talk about Muhammad Ali. You know what I mean? I mean, it was the confidence that they hate. They kind of want you to be humble, appreciative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Grateful for this opportunity that they are giving you. And it didn't seem from the beginning that he had that, and that kind of turned a lot of mainstream America against him. That's what I saw. What do you think just as far as that aspect?
You first, Chuck.
Me first? Well, I think it's that. And let's use the example you just named that we spoke on the show a whole lot of time. Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. When Caitlin Clark was in college at Iowa, Caitlin Clark was a fierce trash talker. Caitlin Clark did this, the John Cena. Caitlin Clark would get rewarded for her trash talk. ESPN did a segment and they called her the queen of clapback. In other words, talking trash back made you a queen. And the second that Angel Reese employed the same dynamic that Caitlin Clark did, she became a black villain. No, that's for Caitlin. You don't get to do that, Angel. You're a villain now. You're disrespectful. And in 5 minutes, Caitlin Clark turned from this fierce competitor who's trash talking to the model of white innocence. And we saw it in 5 seconds. Keith Olbermann has had disparaging remarks. We know David Portnoy does the same, and they descended upon her. And I think that dynamic is something that when someone says, well, it's not about race, it's attitude, well, it's combined, And I think you need the cognitive capacity to combine them both to the person who's yelling at me to have that discussion.
Yeah, very true all around. I hear what you're saying. I think anybody who looks at this honestly would say similar things. I think the other issue that we've sort of touched upon, but only with a little bit from Chuck saying about not needing the money. I think the idea of a player coming in financially secure,
Oh yeah.
and it's not just because from the Sanders family, it's from NIL, name, image, and likeness. And I think that's going to create a very interesting dynamic. It already is in the NBA, where players are staying a year longer in college because they can actually make some bread in college, develop their game, take their classes, have a much easier schedule, and that actually then becomes an attractive alternative. Now, the NBA, which is a quote-unquote players league, they actually love this NIL dynamic because they're getting players who have branded themselves more through the college process. You get the guy, because they always love that when it's like, oh, UNC guy, coming in. Oh, it's Syracuse and Georgetown on the court in the NBA. They love that. But it's a little harder to sell if you're like Kevin Durant. You go to Texas for 3 months, you play your year, and then you're like, peace.
Right.
So,
right.
Spring classes, what are those? So you get a different dynamic, though, and not only players are staying in, but players have some bank. Now, like I said, the NBA I think is into this because of it. Players come in with more ability, more seasoning, more age. But in the NFL, this top-down, hyper-vertical, very white-run league, to have players come in and say, I want to be on your team, but I don't need to be on your team. Mm-hmm. The way players in the past needed to be on the team. I remember Joe DiMaggio once said, you can never make the major leagues unless you grow up with hunger in your stomach, literal hunger. And he's saying that because that's the way it was.
Yeah.
But it's not the way it is.
Right.
But these NFL guys are so prehistoric, they haven't caught up.
100%. I agree with you 100%. Now, I want to switch